sideways. There we go.
Okay.
Good to go? All right, endometriosis, excuse me. What's going on, Secoya Nation? Dr. Shelley bringing you today's Wellness Wisdom. Today we're going to talk about endometriosis thanks to one of our lovely participants online here that asked us for information.
So really enunciate so the captions get you.
Sorry, endometriosis, because if I don't say it slowly and loudly and clearly, the caption won't pick up. Anyway, here we go. So people think that endometriosis is just uterine, but it's not. If you suffer, you know someone who suffers from endometriosis, it can show up in the lungs, in the belly button, in the colon, in the ovaries, along the diaphragm, on nerves and things like that. It comes in a bunch of different places. So these are challenging for some people. So you think about the bladder, like having to pee all the time, having constipation or loose stools or pain in your rectum if you have it in your sigmoid colon, in the lower part of your colon. Nerves, you can imagine anywhere in your body where it's growing on nerve tissue. Diaphragm, painful to breathe if you cough and things like that. Belly button, you know, that's a really sensitive area for a lot of people, so it can affect you in a lot of different ways. So there's a lot of different things related to it, but I'll get to the different tissues in a minute. But when people think of endometriosis, they oftentimes think of the uterus. So when it's inside the uterus, it's called adenomyosis. Okay, so that's the fancy word. Endometriosis is when it's outside, from what I understand from the medical terminology. But then there's endometrioma, which is on the ovary, I believe. So these are just fancy words to help you understand. Like if you get the diagnosis, then you can attach and say, okay, instead of thinking that's something wrong with my ovary, my uterus, or my whatever, it's actually disconnect between my brain and body. So here we go. When a woman wants to be pregnant, but they can't be pregnant, they can't make a home for their fetus, right, their baby. It's not safe, or it's an unhealthy relationship, or they don't have resources, whatever it is, that can affect the lining of the uterus. When there's a family that's split up or broken or fractured, it can feel like that's not their home. And so the endometrial tissue can show up in different places, so that my home is somewhere else is kind of the idea related to it. Some women fear having a baby in their uterus, and then they have this growth in their uterus that can cause challenges with implantation and things like that. That's one way to find it show up in the body. Then there's the idea like, oh, your lights went off. If I only had a different mother, because the uterus is like a nurturing organ. Mothers are typically nurturing, but if I only grew up somewhere else, if I only had a different mother, that's kind of what it's related to. So ovaries, from Dr. Hammer's work, are about loss of love or loss in my life. Like for the male, the testes is the analogous organ to the ovary. So males have loss in their life or loss of love in the testes, and women have it in their ovaries. Then there's the bladder, which is if you have endometrial tissue show up in your bladder, it's because you're trying to or wanting to, unable to mark your territory, set your boundaries, someone's not respecting your boundaries, things along those lines. The belly button is sort of like a shameful experience, like someone has an attack on your integrity. Maybe it's within the family, if you will. So it's kind of like, you know, your belly button, your umbilicus was attached to your mother, so that's where kind of some of this neurological connection comes in. The colon, it's like you're like a victim of some type of filthy experience, some crappy experience, shall we say? But it's like something that's so terrible that you can't forgive it, you can't forget it, you can't move on from it. It's just this filth that you can't wash off of yourself. And so when we've talked about the uterus before for endometrial cancer, if you haven't watched that one, look back at that one, endometrial cancer. But that's kind of like inability to nurture the fetus, inability to love, inability to nurture relationships, inability to hold on to the baby, things like that. The uterus has its own ties. What was interesting when I was reading about this is that endometriosis is thought to be like uterine, right? So what Dr. Hammer found was when he was doing brain scans on people, and he would find this, what's called the Hammer focus, which ended up being like actually his colleagues were mocking him. It was like a Hammer foci. They were mocking him by giving this nickname of Hammer focus. So now they call these rings that show up, these concentric rings inside the brain upon brain scan, or they're called the Hammer foci or the Hammer focus. So they show up in not the brain stem, which controls or governs the uterus, but it shows up in the cerebral medulla, which governs the the ovaries and things like that. And so what's interesting is that when someone has endometriosis, for the captions, endometriosis, it tends to elevate their estrogen levels. But your uterus doesn't make any estrogen. Your ovaries do. So this is kind of one of those signs, like if you're dealing with excess estrogen in your body and you have endometriosis, I would focus more on the ovaries because those are part of what are generating that estrogen in your body. So yeah, play it back, listen to this again for you to help you understand your own situation with endometriosis, wherever it's showing up in your body, to have some more compassion and appreciation for yourself of why, and then share it with your friends and family if you feel like it was beneficial, because for them to understand your journey and what you're going through, and like it's not all up in your head and made up, like, oh, literally I have it on my lungs or my diaphragm or I have it in my bladder or I have it wherever in my body. It's a real deal. So it helps you understand that it's not made up, it's not in your head, but then it helps them understand like the stresses in your life. So for your sake, you can go back and look at these stressors and say, oh, well, that resonates with me and this seems relevant for me and so on and so forth. Because I haven't found situations yet that this stuff doesn't like hit right on. So if you can find a situation where this doesn't apply to me, I'd be fascinated to dig in more of that. So comment below and let us know, yay or nay, if you liked it or not. And we'll see you for the next round of Wellness Wisdom. All right, guys, take care. Bye-bye.